This week I want to talk about the pain we experience from the emotional abuse and the wounds, and how we can use that pain to show us how far we've come on this journey. Welcome to the Mindfuckery podcast, which is FeedSpot's fifth must-listen to podcast on emotional abuse. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and in here we explore areas others fear to tread. I'm a woundologist and I have been for over 20 years, working with past life wounds, clearing ancestral trauma and working with this life wounding. Through my own personal journey, I know how much this hurts and how confusing life becomes. So many questions, no real answers. I'm the author of Finding Lily, which I wrote in Greece as my marriage was crumbling around me. The A to Z of emotional abuse followed as I discovered new words and language and phrases that I had no idea existed, and I realised were now my reality. My third book, Divorce Matters, has been written to support you through the divorce process. It's a really important part. You can get the closure you need to heal the emotional wounds, and because your divorce matters are really important as well, it gives you permission to ask for the information you've been told not to ask for. I'm the founder of the Inner Healing Sanctuary and creator of WoundTalking, the original wound and QuantumGlow healing. And I'm on a mission to educate as many people as I can on the effects of trauma in our lives and our children's lives, and healing the wounds of our mothers and our fathers. It stops here, it stops now, it stops with us. So welcome along for the journey of a lifetime. And you are very, very welcome. Got a nice hot cup of tea today. And I want to talk about how the pain, once transformed, is a guideline. It's a guideline to show us how far we've come and the progress we've made in healing. And like everybody, I have crises of confidence and things like that. And I have experienced one. I don't know whether it was coming out of back-to-back flu or whether it was something else. But people can say things and I get wounded by that. And I saw a post yesterday, and this coach was talking about trolling, and she copied the conversation or the comments. And I don't know whose post it was, whether it was hers or somebody else's, but she copied these comments, and she's been asked to talk on the subject. She was doing research. She has been talking about personal trolling. And I read these comments and they hit me, because I experienced something like that in an area that I thought I was quite safe, which was my own group. And it was a few years ago. And somebody was complaining that I was tagging everybody. And then they were saying that they felt I was overselling in this group. And it hit my confidence. And then reading, because there were a few people going on about it. And one in particular kept saying to everybody, well, let's just leave the group. And I was reading this, and it brought back the same emotion in my body, reading it. To me, it was a bit pack mentality. And that's what I was reading in this woman's post and tapping into. It was something that was highlighting for me. Now, that actually might be something that I've experienced in other areas of my life. That trauma, that tremor, that wounding is held in my body. And this is the work I do. I'm sort of coming down, trying to have a slower week this week. I had a bit of a bonkers week last week. I was interviewed on Monday prior to a talk I was giving on Tuesday. On Tuesday, I gave a talk. And then Wednesday, I was interviewed for a local radio station. There was something else, but I can't remember what it was. Friday, I was trying to take some downtime, and Saturday. And then yesterday I got tagged in something on Facebook. I did an interview with somebody that I know. We trained together way back in 2016, 8 years ago. And he has his own podcast. I was able to, it was perfect timing for me. I think I could sit up with my flu at this point, but I definitely couldn't have talked for the podcast. So I was able to use the interview we did back at the end of last year. And we did two. I think we did one in November and one in December. I went back and I did some work with him, and we recorded it on the podcast. I will share it with you. It might be next week. I might even do it, because I think we're coming up for the 2-year anniversary in a few weeks of the Mindfuckery podcast. Anyway, we'd been talking about doing some work and recording it for the podcast, so we did that. And actually reading the show notes, I remembered what it was all about. He'd received some communication from a TV company that were asking if he could be an expert coach on a relationship show. And he was internally going, oh my gosh, yes, that's amazing. I'd love to do that. And finally, it's going to open me up to a different audience or a bigger audience. confidence and I can help more people and all these things going on. And I can't remember whether it was the second phone call or at the end of that phone call, they turned around and said to him, of course, you know, we're talking to a few other coaches, we will let you know, sort of thing. And his internal dialogue was, okay, well, that's it. I'm never going to get picked for that. You know, that it's all over then if that's the case.
So it was that statement that we worked on.
And that's sort of what I want to touch on today. I talk a lot about this, and I do say right at the beginning of the intro, I go in areas that others dare to tread, because I like to look at this on a deeper level. People say they're doing empowerment work. Fantastic. You know, we all deserve to be empowered. But for me, it goes deeper. And for me, if we don't get to the root cause of where the trauma was, why we allowed this relationship to happen, the cause that allowed us to overlook the red flags, the reason that we didn't take action, the reason then that we couldn't leave that relationship, the reason then that we couldn't stand up and say enough's enough, no, that to me is the important work, particularly with emotional abuse. Now, don't get me wrong, there are things that can go in an instant. And I talked about this, and I can't remember now whether I talked about it on my talk or on the radio show. I think it was the talk, where I have this wounding, this voice in my head, and I kept repeating it. And I'd had it for about 6 years. And I was able to turn around and say, well, hang on a minute. I was told this under these circumstances. And this was happening at the time. And I've taken this on as a belief that I'm bipolar. And I think I was getting ready to do an Instagram live or a Facebook live. And suddenly the thought came to me as I was reading the notes that I'd written that our relationship was a lie, because I think that's what I was talking about. That seed went, well, hang on a minute, if everything's a lie and our whole relationship's a lie, why am I hanging on to this thought? And it was a belief that I was bipolar. Everything that happened at certain points, I thought it was my fault because I was bipolar. And then I sort of tracked it back. I'd never, ever been accused of it ever before. I'd never had depression or a mental illness. I'd always thought of myself as quite stable. Most people said I was so laid back, I was horizontal, and nothing seemed to faze me. So it sort of contradicted everything that I'd been told or believed. And as the moment I thought about this and I made that statement, hang on a minute, if our relationship was built on a lie and everything, particularly towards the end, was definitely a lie, why was I holding this belief about myself? And it was gone. Trauma from emotional abuse, complex post-traumatic stress really takes a toll on us. And that continuous hormone hit that we're receiving and being in that stress, fight, flight, form, freeze, you know, ready to move mode does take a toll on the mind and the body and the spirit, emotionally, physically, on every single level. You start to wonder about your morals, about your beliefs. You start that from the spirituality, because I talk about emotional, mental, physical, spiritual and financial. It affects you for me, it affects you in all 5 areas. You start to question all your beliefs. You start to question everything that you thought was true. So going back to John, and we've recorded this podcast. I will share it with you. It shows how we deal with some of these voices in our heads, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how we can overcome this and how we can use the emotions as markers. And we can take, like I talk about timelines, we can actually use this very similar technique with our emotions. And this is a bit of somatic work as well. So you can start to diffuse and desensitize the emotions, but you can use them as markers. People say it's really unhealthy to look back. Keep looking forward. I don't believe that. Again, it goes down that route of going where others fear to tread, because to me it's healthy to look back. For me today to stand here and look back over my shoulder and go, oh my gosh, I'm not the mess on the floor in November of 2016, crying out, trying to cry actually, because for me the important bit was getting to the root of where this came from, and to cry until I laughed, so that emotion was literally left my body. For me, there was no way I could control my emotions. I would sit there at my desk, and at a certain time during the day, my eyes just leaked. I was suffering with adrenal fatigue, and that was really bad at certain points. I had really bad rumination. So for me now to stand here in 2024 and look back at 2016, I can see the healing I've done. I can go back to 2018, I can see the healing I've done. I can go back to 2020 and I can see the healing I've done.
I believe
It is powerful to look back, not to live in the past, that's different, but to look back and write this timeline, even to go back and say, where was I in January? Well, for me, energetically, I was in bed and I couldn't get out of bed. Then I was followed by the second bout included sinusitis. So for me, where I am today, I've got tons of energy. I'm still building myself up. I managed to get to the gym 3 times last week. I'm aiming to get there 4 times this week. I'm gradually building my energy back, like I did with the emotional abuse, like I did with the breakdown of the relationship. These emotions are like echoes from the past. And if we can listen to these echoes and hear them, understand who said them, where they came from, what they meant, what was behind them, these words or situations or vibrations that we get in certain circumstances then trigger the echoes to experience what we experienced at the time. Now, if we experienced that at a time we were a young child and we didn't have the coping mechanisms, is it that we don't have the coping mechanisms now because we got trapped at that point? Or can we go back and rewrite that? And in fact, that reminds me, triggers a memory for me. This happened to me, when was it? July last year. I follow someone called Astro Butterfly. And in fact, I've been following her for a long time. She talked about Chiron. And I'm going to say it was either 2018 or 2016 when I was healing from emotional abuse. And I found out about Chiron. Now, you might not be into astrology. I only dabble on the very, very surface level. I couldn't tell you what a north node or a south node or the degree of whatever and what that means. I have no idea. But I love the stories. I think from stories we can tune into our bodies and see where that story resonates and how we can learn from it. So Chiron is the wounded healer, and there's a whole, oh my gosh, the story around his birth and the trauma and the rejection. So I've been following her for a long time, and in July last year I got an email, and it was all about Venus going into retrograde, and it was talking about various different things that were happening. And I reached out to someone I know, and I said to her, look, this is calling me to run a course. Do you fancy doing this? So we did, and we ran, I think it was a 6-week course, and it was just amazing. The shifts people had, they were doing it in little sections. Some people were doing it every day, other people were doing it all at a weekend. But it was just amazing, and the creativity that came from that, and the shifts for me personally running it, and the learnings between the two of us, it was crazy, but in a really, really good way. And so I got another email yesterday, and I was like, right, I'm going to replicate that. So anyway, Chiron and Mercury are working together between tomorrow, the 20th of March, right the way through to the middle of May. And it's about looking at the wounds, the ancestors, something that I'm really passionate about, putting that together today. And I'm going to be running a course between the end of the week and the middle of May on looking at these wounds, looking at the things we say to ourselves, the beliefs we hold. But these come maybe from our ancestors. These are the things, the gifts, the unwanted gifts given to us by our parents, parents, parents. You know, it goes back. Those are the ancestors. That's what happens. And these ripples run through our families. It could be something that happened decades ago, generations ago. And because the fear or the trauma or something came along with it, it got passed down like an unwanted gift to the next generation, until someone says, well, I'm not doing that. When I used to talk about this many years ago, before I was working in this area of emotional abuse, I would talk about the expectations of families. And I did know quite a few people this had happened to. It might be that the family came from a long line of doctors or accountants or bank managers, and you were that really creative and you're forced into a box that doesn't fit for you. In a way, this is what happens with emotional abuse or trauma, or it might be wounds of shame, abandonment, betrayal. And these are echoes of our past that follow us through. So how we can do this, and this is maybe where some of our trauma comes from, is we can look at where we are now, and we can look over our shoulder and say, it might be that you've come out of this relationship just a few months ago, and you can use this marker and you could say, okay, let me mark in the sand or on my bit of paper how I'm feeling. And it might be that you're in a lot of pain. You know, it's quite new, it's quite fresh. These wounds are painful. So you might say, look, my pain is 10 at the moment. It might be that overall I'm feeling about a 7, but when I start to think about the relationship, that's a 10. When I start to think about something else in my life that is associated with the relationship, that's an 8 or a 9. So you can build up a pattern of what this is doing for you. How do I feel emotionally? How do I feel spiritually? How do I feel physically? How do I feel mentally? How do I feel financially? So let's just use those 5. So you can maybe write them down. Emotionally, oh my gosh, I'm a mess. I'm a 10. Physically, yeah, I'm not too great. I've let everything go. Now, it might be that you say you're an 8 or a 9, and then you can go through the rest. Financially, you might be, yeah, that's a 10. And then as you work on yourself, if you came back in 6 months' time or even 3 months' time, you could say, actually, you know, I've been doing a lot of grounding, I've been doing a lot of breathing work, I'm in my body, I do get triggered still. And I think the rumination one, which I'll speak about in a minute, is really crucial as well. And actually, I get my chart out again, and 3 months down the line, I'm actually feeling like a 6 to a 7 emotionally, and it hurts. And physically, I've done it. I mean, I'm walking and I'm stretching, I'm doing yoga, or I'm swimming, and I'm feeling like a 7 or an 8, and can go through this chart again. And this is looking over your shoulder because you're looking back to where you were and saying, oh my gosh, I actually feel empowered. I don't feel at the moment that I've actually come on, but when I listen to my body and talk to my body, the pain that I'm holding in my body is reducing. Rumination, I experienced, it was really bad. And this is how I came up with my 3 steps of breathing, grounding, and talking to the wounds, and honest conversations, I call it. And I was in rumination initially. Going through the divorce, I could be there for about 5 days. And I mean, I could literally not function for 5 days. I'd binge watch TV. I'd hardly eat anything. I would get up and shower, you know, could be there for 5 days. And then I'd come out of that cycle, and then something else would happen and I might be there for 3 days. And I've spoken about this. I was running an energy course, and I was teaching grounding. I was teaching breathing and dry brushing and things like that. I think I was teaching those. And all of a sudden I've realised, and this is why I think it's important, it really is important to look over your shoulder and see how far you've come. I suddenly realised that rumination was a day, and then I realised rumination was a few hours. And what I had been doing at the time, this is why I think it's really important to write your story out, is I was going, in really bad rumination, I'd go and sit down and I'd write out all the things that I remember and all the stories that I remember being told, and that proved that I wasn't this crazy person. This guy had history and had done it to multiple people and multiple families. It wasn't something new. This is something new I'd experienced, although I had experienced a different type of abuse, and also physical abuse. So writing the story, this is the evidence that I've got that it isn't me. And that's really where the honest conversation stuff comes in. So I was grounding, breathing, dry brushing, and doing some other techniques and chakra balancing. I was coming out of this rumination really quickly. I might go and sit on the sofa. I might be there 20 minutes going, oh no, oh my gosh, I've calmed my whole nervous system down. And that is really where we need to be going with this. And it was simple stuff. I'd done courses, and to me they were really complicated, and there was so much information to read and stuff like that. And it was like, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate. So the key icing cherry on the cake moment was when I did get a letter or an email or something, and I was really taken aback by my response. And my response at the time was that I actually wanted to reach out now to my estranged husband, and I wanted to talk to him. For some reason, I needed to talk to him. And we'd gone through this, I think we're 2 years in at this point of divorce. And I was like, this is weird. Why would I want to do that? This guy has said all these horrible things and accused me of stuff. And why would I want to reach out to him? And so that moment I went in, and at the times you want to reach out, reach inward and ask yourself what it was. Now, I had at this point worked with 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds when I was doing my healing, and they were multiple ones. And this was, I can't remember now because I think I was still writing the book, this was one of those moments. And I spoke to her, a 3-year-old, who told me what she wanted. So I gave her what she wanted, which was reassurance that everything was going to be okay. And I can't remember what the other things were she needed. There were a couple of things. And I was able to do that. And that was like a massive turning point for me. Now, all of our healing is multi-leveled, multi-layered. It goes on and on. It drops deep. And so as we're peeling back the layers from the proverbial onion, as it's, you might have heard that reference, we are discovering parts. So we peel back a layer and then there's another wound below it. And that's why, for me, let's just go straight to the core. Let's go straight to the core of that onion and get to that wound, the center, the core of that onion. So we're not peeling back the layers over years and years and years, and we remove one part of the wound and then we remove, it's another wound, there's another situation that brings us pain. Let's just go straight to the center of it, remove that, and then with it you're taking out the lesser wounds. But to me, this is why I describe it like a verruca. You get this virus in your body holds the virus, and it might initially be that you get the root and you remove it, but if you haven't removed all of that, if you've left one of those little tendrils in your foot, that virus is still in your body. And this is what's happening with the wounding. If you haven't challenged these statements that are about you, if you haven't got to the root cause, it's still sitting there. And then it's waiting for that perfect storm. It's waiting for the right environment to trigger again. And that's the verruca, but that's also the wounding. And this is why I believe that these relationships have come to this point in our lives to help us heal, but not just help us heal us, but help us heal the future generations and heal the wounding from our past. Honestly, I think we're in this amazing pivotal moment in time where we energetically can change everything. I don't believe looking back is unhealthy. It shows you where you've come from and how far you've come. And I think writing your story out is really healthy. I think it helps you with rumination. Rumination, that's the guide. You can look at rumination and say, like you can with how much pain I'm in, drawing a circle and dividing it up in like a pie chart, and saying, right, this part of me represents finance, this is emotional, this is physical, this is spiritual, this is mental, and grading them. And then you can come back in 3 months' time and say, actually, I wouldn't have said I'd come this far, but actually when I listen to my body and feel into my body, I can see how far I've come. Rumination's another great indicator. How long are you staying in rumination, believing this is all your fault and your energy is really dense and really low? And all of a sudden you can look at it. Oh, wow, where I was there 5 days, I'm now there 20 minutes. And now I can go, okay, no, I challenge these thoughts. And that is the wound talking. Honest conversations is actually talking to the inner child and having that conversation and finding out what he or she really, really wants. And wound talking is actually talking to the wounds and those statements that we make in our head and challenging them and saying, is that true? And honestly, it's life-changing stuff, I promise you. So put some links. I'm running a course on honest conversations on the 13th of April. It's a Saturday. And I'll also pick the link to the course that I'm running. It's called The Identity Wound. It's running from the end of March through to the middle of May. We'll be looking at wounds, we'll be looking at ancestral wounding, we'll be looking at Chiron and his messages, and there'll be something every single day, whether it be a worksheet, meditation or a short video. As I said, the last one I ran, which was Venus descending, some did it every day and others did the week over a weekend, because they're small bite-sized chunks of information but very deep healing. So it's really excited. I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm going to put both the links below in the description box. So if you want to join me on one or either or even both would be fantastic. And let's change this. Let's change the vibration. Let's change our vibration, because we all are vibrational. And you know that when you meet someone who either steals your energy, or you walk into a room and it either lifts you or drains you, you can feel that vibration. We all vibrate. Everything vibrates. So come and join me. It would be great to guide you and take you through these both journeys. Let's start healing these wounds. Let's get to the center of the onion. It's so important. It can be years, it can be decades, peeling back each layer and healing the next bit and healing the next bit. Let's just go straight into the middle and remove it, and then let the rest of it fall apart. Because you take the center away, the onion is going to fall apart because there's nothing holding it together. And that is where the magic is. That's where the alchemy is. That's where the healing starts, in the center of that onion, in the center of your wound, your original wound. And said, some of these are superficial ones that are given to you. We can dispel those with a few simple statements and they can be gone. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Know that you can just look at where you are now, where you were in the past, and see how your energy has changed and what's changed. It might be the people around you that are affecting you, and maybe that you need to move out of that environment, change the people that are surrounding you into more positive and uplifting people. Don't forget that we also need to be healing the wounds that have trapped us and got us into that situation. I'm sending you loads and loads and loads of love, and don't forget to check the links out for the courses.